you're supposed to breastfeed your baby, full stop.
So I lift my shirt, I start feeding him, and I'm also feeding myself. And my mom says, what are you doing?
Feeding my baby.
Yeah. And she says, I would prefer you go into the bathroom to do that. And I said, do you want to take your plate and go eat in the bathroom? I'm not giving my son his dinner in a bathroom.
And I did not want to make it a thing, but my body was beat like, don't look at me, am I going to get yelled at? Because you've seen that. You've seen people go up to total strangers and say that it was inappropriate. And then the audacity is just crazy.
I think that we are so fearful that if our daughters aren't pretty enough or thin enough, they won't be chosen.
When I look at these girls on TikTok, they look like they're in their 20s with how done up they are.
We are actually going backwards. My daughter now has less rights over her body than I did when I was 21. 90% of movie directors are men. So even when you think you're being entertained, you're only being entertained through the male perspective. It's why I stopped watching TV.
That's such terrible advice. Like, you're telling women to be men in order to be successful. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad that you happen to be in North Carolina and that I could convince you to pop over to the coast.
I am so happy. When I looked at some of your content, I thought, this is a woman I want to sit down with, because you're talking about a lot of topics and a wide range of them that no one's covering. So that gets me very excited.
Oh, I appreciate it.
Yes.
Yeah. The same with yours. It's like, have you ever read the book Outwitting the Devil?
No.
No? Oh my gosh. I highly recommend it. It is, why is the author escaping me right now? I should have taken my nootropics. Outwitting the Devil. I'm gonna look it up because I can't, it's like my favorite book, and I recommend it to everybody. See, Jamie, this is why I like my laptop, because it's faster. Napoleon Hill. I can't believe I forgot that. But highly recommend the audio version just because it will give you goosebumps.
Okay.
But my husband was just like kind of rereading it the other day and taking notes. And one of the ways that they say like the devil takes hold of people is through fear, and how powerful that is. And the main fear points that he mentioned in the book were poverty, criticism, fear of aging, and fear of death. And then my husband's like, which one, like if you categorize these, like which ones are the most alive for you? And like definitely criticism is up there, but fear of aging is there more so than fear of death. And I'm being truly honest. Like,
I appreciate that.
Like not like dying of old age. Like that's what I mean. Not like something tragic or violent, but like for some reason, the thought of aging is so terrifying to me. And I know I'm not alone in that. So I love the work that you're doing, because I feel that there's still a lot that I have to kind of process and integrate with. And there's still a lot there. And it's like, why is that there? It's so weird.
I think that fear of aging is prominent for women in particular in the Western culture, because it has been our only sense of power. Youthfulness is what is most prized, what is most sought after in this culture. A youthful woman, a youthful face. And I think that it goes without saying, as a woman begins to, for lack of a better word, I think that I don't say this word, but I think other people would use the word deteriorate or show signs of aging, she is somehow less relevant to the world, because she can't give you, in the ways that we exchange with women, she can't give you the pleasure, the turn on, the suppleness, the tightness, the youthfulness, the fertility. She can't give you all the things, because we have always been this function as women to profit from, to take from, to gain from. And when the woman is no longer able to give the man the youth, the beauty, the prize, all of those things, then there's this question about what is left. And I think as women who, when we have not poured any other value into our identity, then when the youth slips, it feels like death. Because it has been what has most garnered. It's the thing, it's the prize to have a youthful face. To be told you look younger than you actually are is a huge compliment for women. I find it deeply insulting, because my goal is not to hide any of this history. Because what I've learned through living is this at 51, this is so much wisdom. And I also understand the potency that lives inside a woman at this age. And I think we are terrified of that, because we can manipulate the younger, more youthful woman. We can't manipulate as easily the older woman who's lived so much life and has a lot more non-negotiables if you want to be in proximity to her.
So I definitely think for myself that there's like a lot of identification with your body, right? And how you look. And then you see that, you know, like even in my mid 30s, it's very different than in my, like things just look different. And that's hard because it's
Wait
like
till you get to 50.
you wake up and you're like, you can notice a difference. And that sounds crazy, but sometimes it feels like overnight. And then it's this internal battle of like, there's a solution for that. And now they have like the mini facelift that people talk about, and you can do that and then still leave by lunch. Like there is zero downtime for this thing that they're pitching, and preventative Botox and all of these things. And it's like, while I'm not against people that do what they want to do, I also really would want for myself to just like be okay in my body. Like, and if I decide to do whatever, then that's coming from a different place, like not from like a deficit or trying to please somebody else. But like, how do you get to, I don't know, like seeing that and like cherishing it, like loving all of it? You know?
You have to make an active decision. You have to be willing to, because the whole world is going to sell you a solution around every corner. But you can't sell a woman a solution who doesn't see a problem. I don't see a problem, so you can't possibly sell me anything. There is nothing that needs to be fixed. If I decide that this is a problem, then I'm going to fall into that slippery slope. And so I personally don't see it as anything wrong that is happening. I see it actually as one of the most miraculous, incredible things I've ever witnessed. And only through that process of watching myself every morning in the mirror age and welcoming it and revering it and honoring it, only through that did I become this liberated and free. I would have never become this liberated and free if I was, oh no, I'm really just doing this Botox for me. It's for nobody else. I even think we've disguised it as a form of feminism. And so women bypass their own spiritual process of aging by telling themselves, oh no, I don't do this for anybody else. I do this for me. Really, because I bet if you lived on a remote island and that was never planted in your head as something that was wrong and it was celebrated, you wouldn't. You have been conditioned to believe that you're even doing it just for yourself. It runs very deep.
Yeah, you had this clip and I was just playing it and Jamie was listening, and it was when we're in this pink dress and you're talking about if you don't have anything nice to say about your daughter's body, don't say anything at all. And he's like, who's going to say anything to their, and he's a dad. He's like, who's going to say anything to their daughter's body that's negative? And I was like, my parents. All the time. And I recently did medicine work, and it was just like my husband and I, and we had a facilitator, and it was MDMA assisted therapy with psilocybin at the end. And it's funny because what I found for me is, even before we went into it, I was like, well, what happens if nothing comes up? And he's just kind of looking at me like, okay. He's like, yep, okay, maybe not. And we'll see. And just kind of like we'll see. And then it takes a second to, because my control issues hit, and I was like, it's not working. And he's like, oh, we got a live one today. So these memories start coming up, and I'm like, these didn't mean anything. Like I thought, nothing happened on all of this. And then it keeps working after. So I'm like a week out, and I've been having the craziest dreams, but like lucid, and memories come up, and then it's my body wanting to work through them. And one of them was like, I must have been 12 at the time, and my dad, it's like low-rise jeans were in, and I just like, I have a butt and I have legs, and like those are not the most flattering cut for my body. And he
says who?
Says me, because I'll spill out of it if I sit. Like I will sit and my butt will take over the pants, no matter the size. But he'll come over and like he'd pinch my hip. And he's like, what's this? And the way I was doing my makeup, he was like really critical about, instead of getting to the root issue of why is my little girl putting on so much makeup, he was kind of like criticizing the way I was doing it. And just like my gut dropped, like my heart dropped in that moment, and then being brought back to that. And it's like, that had such an impact on me as a woman. And it probably didn't even register as anything to him, but it's like, why would you do that to your little girl? And the way we treat little girls is just so messed up. And then we wonder why like there's all this body dysmorphia so young, and why that's so common. And like, I'll talk to my husband about it. He's like, I don't understand what you see. Like, what, like, how are you being so critical of yourself? Because like what I see is not what you see. And he doesn't understand like where that warped reality comes from. And it's like all of these little moments that I think people write off as nothing, and it really is something.
It definitely seeds inside somewhere. And it, even if, like you said, if you were unconscious to it until this journey happened, it was in there playing a part of your identity, of the stories that you told yourself every time you picked a pair of jeans, every time you went to the mirror, every time you assessed yourself. That was part of the unconscious message that you were playing back to yourself. And I think we start that with little girls because we see. Even again, I don't think it's intentional often. Sometimes I think it is very intentional and very harmful. But again, I think that we are so fearful that if our daughters aren't pretty enough or thin enough, they won't be chosen. Because we, as a culture, as a society, have put so much pressure on women to look and be perfect to be chosen. And we don't teach girls to choose themselves. And the goal is, what is this about? But what lives under, what is this about? What lives under that is probably no one's going to find that attractive. And that's his own fear. That's his own belief about which women get to be picked and which women get to be worthy, because we see women as ornaments and not humans.
Yeah, it's just like I was never a nail biter, but I was like that impressionable age where you see your friend do something like, oh, what's that? And I had a friend that was, and I did it one time, and I remember I never did it again because I did it one time in front of my dad, and he's like, men hate that. And it's like, instead of saying,
wow,
I know, it's just wild, and it's like, instead of just saying like, that's probably like, what's going on? Are you feeling okay? Are you nervous? Because usually that's what it's indicative of, like a nail biter. It's like to make it for somebody else is just so crazy. And when I was revisiting that memory, it was like the inner child work, which I think is so powerful, and like wiping the makeup off, and it's like, you don't need this, like you're already so beautiful, like why are you painting your face like this? Because it's like the heavy brown liner and the pale, like that J-Lo thing was really in at the time. And I feel like it's only gotten worse and accelerated since I was a teenager, because when I look at these girls on TikTok, they look like they're in their 20s with how done up they are. And it's fascinating to me, but also like, why the rush to like, quote, womanhood? Because that's what they think they're doing, like this rush to womanhood and this rush to over sexualize little girls.
Well, I think that they're watching their moms. So they're watching. So the moms now have access to things they didn't have 15 years ago. So the mom looks a certain way, and that's the role modeling. You cannot tell me that these 10 and 12-year-old girls, I have 4 children, they're young adults now, but you cannot tell me that these 10 and 12-year-olds who set up these TikTok accounts and the 12-step get ready with me for school routine is not supported by the mother. Who took her to Sephora to buy all the products? Who's helping her even get an account started? Who's helping her with her lighting? And so when I look at this, I'm like, this is perpetuated. This is a learned behavior in the home. And women are like, oh, no, it has nothing to do with the parenting. It's just that they see all these things on TikTok. Who monitors what they're watching on TikTok? Who gives them the phone and lets them just run free and do whatever they want on it? So it's coming back to, we are really, it's devastating how much we are losing our way as women. And we wonder why state to state, we're losing more rights to our body. We wonder why there are less and less women sitting on boards. We are actually going backwards. My daughter now has less rights over her body than I did when I was 21. My daughter's 21 right now. So we're not actually in any way, shape, or form doing anything to preserve or elevate womanhood. We're going back to like, this is Handmaid's Tale. We're going back to where women are simply served as functions now of what they can provide.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because it is who's taking them and allowing for this. So how do you, because let's say you have a mom that doesn't agree with it, and like, let's say her daughter is kind of rebelling. So maybe you have a mom that is more natural and the girl is kind of more peer oriented. So she's following her pack or what's normalized in her like ecosystem. It's obviously, if that's the case, then that girl doesn't have a sense of identity of who I am, right? Like there is no actual will there because she's molding to the crowd. So it's what are the steps to remove that and to like have her find herself and her authenticity again, so that she's not just doing things because everyone else is, right?
Right. It begins in first and foremost, no matter what, hands down, it begins with the mother modeling that, even if that doesn't catch up until years later. But it begins with talking to your daughter. When I started to see my daughter slipping at 15 into this world of like what everybody else was doing and following models and following all the photos of, the girls who had the perfect body or whatever the image was, I started to sit next to her and ask her, like, show me, like, who are you following? Why do you follow that person? Tell me. Does she inspire you? What about her makes you feel better about yourself? So I started asking questions from a place of curiosity so she could start to pique her own curiosity and ask without me saying, you shouldn't be following this and that's a bad influence. Teenagers can't hear that. If they don't hear it. What I'm helping her do is become an informed and curious consumer. I'm helping her start to like lift up the curtain and say, wait, what's actually behind here? Why am I doing this? At the time she had and she was babysitting. So it was her money that she was using, but she went through like a period of 6 or so months. She had these long acrylic nails. She was doing the fake eyelashes, the spray tan, coloring her hair, doing all the things. And I just kept like breathing and kept having conversations with her, but never about what you're doing is wrong. Just like, oh, I'm so curious about that. Tell me more. And now at 21, it's been years now. She let go of that. She went through like a phase of 6 months or a year. She doesn't do any of it. She doesn't do her nails. She doesn't even really wear makeup. She stopped coloring her, her hair years ago. And she wants nothing to do with any of it because one of the phrases that I raised her on is pay more attention to how you feel while you're living your life, not how you look while you are living your life. And so she's like, when I really started listening to that and paying attention, like, it didn't actually feel great to sit there forever and like it actually hurt when they were doing the thing on my nails or, getting my hair colored was taking like all of my babysitting money. And then in the end, I didn't end up loving it anyways. Or then I did think a lot about what you talked about, Mom, and like all the toxins being absorbed into my scalp. And it kind of went against how we live so naturally in other ways of our life. So she arrived at it on her own, but I don't believe she would have as readily or easily if I hadn't piqued that level of questioning inside of her. That was my responsibility as a mother to steer her into questioning what lives underneath all this. And if she would have remained doing it, that would have been her choice.
But just like make the choice for yourself, essentially.
Know what choice you're making.
Right.
Don't just go with like, well, everybody's doing this. You know what? Everybody also did a lot of things when it came to childbirth and breastfeeding that if I would have gone that way, I would have never had the exquisite experiences I had because I wanted to look at what was possible when I followed my body. And that's very opposite what we do in this country. We tell women to lay back. You don't know what you're doing. You won't be able to handle it. We've got it for you.
Did you have natural births?
I did.
Amazing. Did you do like the water birth or?
Well, my daughter was meant to be a water birth, but by the time the midwife was filling up the tub and I went to get in, I was like, I have to push. So they took me out and I went right onto the bed and I was on all fours and she came right out that way.
Oh, that's amazing. Good for you. Yeah, that's incredible.
I went on to teach natural childbirth for 10 years after that as well, just because it was a really pivotal point of my life because I'd studied psychology. I have my doctorate and I tapped into something that I'd never learned anywhere else. And it was all of the embodiment and somatic work that is completely missing in a traditional doctoral program. And I think most psychological programs because the theory is written by Freud and Carl Jung. And while there's pieces and parts to all of that, if you really understand like where a lot of this theory comes from, it's deeply, deeply patriarchal and damaging to women. And so I was like, wow, I studied all these years and I was practicing under a very patriarchalized system. So when I tapped into my own warrior inside of me, it was only then that I could bring that into the work of with women in my practice.
So which practices would you say like are patriarchal? Like in just like psychology in general?
Yeah, well, all the theories are written by men.
Yeah.
Right? So everything you're reading, psychological theories that are written, you're reading it from a man's perspective. For example, the most recent data, I included this in my book that's coming up next year. They're movie directors. When I first started working on my book a couple of years ago, and then I put it to the side, and then I picked it back up again, it was, I think, 74% of movie directors were men. As of 2 months ago, 90% of movie directors are men. So even when you think you're being entertained, you're only being entertained through the male perspective. So even Netflix, even the big box movies are, the big blockbusters is still a male's story. And it's why I stopped watching I didn't know that data until about 10 years ago when I really started like searching for myself. But it's why I stopped watching TV so long ago. It's because it felt so uninspiring to me. The characters were not deeply nuanced. I longed for so much more depth. It was the female characters hardly ever took a lead, and when they did, it was like cheap love, and she was like, they made her look like she was an idiot. Or the only other time she was the lead was when she had huge boobs and a skin tight outfit, and she was the superhero acting like a man. So I started to associate like, oh my God, I see what we're doing. Like even the subliminal messaging, not so subliminal, that is happening around every corner for us, even when we think we're relaxing.
See, I see like a lot of movies where like I'm so bad with names, but like Sigourney Weaver, I think is like a great example, right? And she did Alien, and like they didn't try to make her into anything that she like a glamazon that was, you know, fighting big bad aliens. Like she was herself. I think definitely there's a lot of what you're saying, but I think you can find a ton of examples where you have like female leads and they're strong, and then also like the strength in being soft is like something that I think is missing more than all the other stuff, which is you see women that are being pushed to try to be like men, and then that is strength, right? Like brute strength, instead of what is the strength that is inherently feminine.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? So like I don't have a problem not seeing like a badass woman like taking down a room full of guys, because to me that's not realistic. Like most women cannot do that. I want to see like a woman that like brings people together because like of her softness and her magnetism, and to me I think that's also strength.
I think that's what's missing.
Yeah. 100%.
So I think we're in complete agreement, because the only time we see women take the lead, more often than not, it's in a very masculine energy. Even with Sigourney Weaver in that movie that you're talking about, she was very masculine presenting. I'm talking about where are the female leaders in that surrender and strength of leadership. That's what a wisdom holder, like a woman who's lived as much life as I have, that's what we bring. Where are the movies where she's the main character? I can't name one off the top of my head. We'd have to do some research. We could probably find a couple.
Yeah, Sleeping Beauty was a really good one. She was a really young actress. I don't know if she's done a lot since then, but she did an interview and it went super viral because it was in this age of everyone kind of demonizing like love. Like if you want love as a woman, that means you must be weak and somehow missing something. So to admit that you wanted partnership meant that you were in the patriarchy, right? Like you're anti-feminist if you wanted love. And to me, I think that's really silly, because I think we're supposed to experience life together and create and co-create together. And she unapologetically was just like soft and feminine. And she's like, I don't need a sword to be strong, like, you know, and I highly recommend someone check out that interview because it was so, so good. And I wish that there were more examples like that. And then you see this like resistance in this fight to being a woman now, because I think people think they see vulnerability as weakness when it's the opposite. It's like such a
absolute opposite. I taught about that in my retreat this weekend, is that the vulnerability is the power. Oh, and because I think we've been confused or raised to believe that if we were vulnerable, there's a lot of language around she's crazy. And I'm not talking about dysregulated emotions. I have epic emotional hygiene practices, because my responsibility is not to leak out any of what I'm going through in my personal life onto my children, onto my clients, into this interview, onto my partner. My goal is to stay emotionally hygienic so that I'm squeaky clean in all the places that I show up. And that means I have to show up in like the things that are hard, and that where I'm feeling vulnerability or where I'm feeling uncertain. And to own that, even in my relationship, and I've been married for 28 years, it is what has kept us together. It is the most powerful, beautiful frequency. When the version of me 15 years ago would be like, no, I'm good. I got it all. No, don't worry about it. But inside, I was wanting something different. But I wanted him to believe like, oh my gosh, she's like got it all figured out. She's just amazing. Because I thought that was what was more appealing. And then it was only 15 years ago when I stepped into this totally different archetype, and like the way I wanted to be in my life in every space and place was that vulnerable power. And that is what I've seen be the game changer for my life, my business, and what I teach to my clients, and the changes for their lives. So I think we have had that feeling of like we had to be just like men to take up the space or have a voice
or lean in, like that book. And I'm like, that's such terrible advice. Like you're telling women to be men in order to be successful, and we're never going to be. And then it creates, I think, more animosity between the sexes because they don't see you now. Did you ever read the book Queen's Code?
Yes.
It's one of my favorite books. Yes. And she gives an example of this like corporate woman and how she was in her masculine and trying to be a man and trying to like domineer these guys instead of going in and like leaning in with with her femininity. And then that was the thing that like brought the team together. And then the numbers started like skyrocketing. And it's because she wasn't trying to be a man and compete with them anymore. Now they were complementing each other. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. So for me, what I love is like when I see people that are trying to like make women be the best versions of themselves and men be the best versions of themselves without like demonizing the other sex. And it's like taking full accountability for your reality and the way people treat you, right? Like, okay, how am I asking for this in a weird way? Like, how's it serving me? And then working on myself. And then in that self-development, like you'll notice everything else around you start to shift.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Because the universe sees your level of radical responsibility for yourself and the role you play in every dynamic. And so then things start to come in alignment for you in a way that is in so much more service to you as a person, because the universe knows you can handle more. And they bring these beautiful things that's happened over and over again in my life. And I'm a firm believer of radical responsibility. Even this weekend, I was teaching the women about this idea of getting triggered by other women. Every single time you get triggered by another woman, to take a couple of breaths and ask yourself, what does she have or represent that I so wish I had more of? Because almost always there is a gift inside of there. There's something you can learn to deepen into who you are. And I had a woman reach out to me this morning and say, and a couple of them happened real time, but one woman's like, yeah, when you said that, I thought, no, there's nobody. And I even asked them to look around the room and see who in that room they felt triggered by after those couple of days. And she's like, I looked around the room and I was like, yeah, there's just one woman I'm triggered by. And she said, and on the plane ride home yesterday, the more I thought about it, I understood why I was so triggered by her. I was so triggered by her level of freedom and how she expresses herself in every way, shape, and form. And I realized I'm very repressed. And she triggered that part of me. And I wanted to make her wrong. But in reality, I wish I could be as free as she is. So it's like every time we feel that trigger, and that's where that sisterhood wound comes into. Like we get the sisterhood wound because we experienced, whatever we experienced with our mothers. And we just keep perpetuating this women against women in the competition. And I think we're actually our own worst enemies.
Go through the comment section. It's women to women. It's usually women being way worse. And it's fun. So I used to be in the adult industry.
Yes.
I've been out for longer than I was in. And it is a very complicated industry. It is not all good. It is not all bad. Like you could spend years dissecting all of the different layers to it. But something that people say kind of blank statedly is that it perpetuates like a bad body image for women. And that is one thing I will die on this hill. I think it's the opposite, because if you watch adult entertainment porn, there are all different bodies, all different kinds of like hair, no hair, something in between. And you'll have girls that are plus size that have massive audiences and people telling them how beautiful they are. You'll have flat chested girls with the same thing and everything in between. So I actually think for me, it taught me like all kinds of bodies are beautiful. Like someone will find that beautiful. Yes. And it's the women that are like, you're fat. That's cellulite. That's too small. Look at like whatever. Like I find in my experience and throughout all of my years shooting, it was always women that were the most critical of other women, and men finding like everything that I would say is a flaw hot. And they're like, I love that wrinkle on your face. It's my favorite thing about you. Like, what are you talking about? You know what I mean? So I think we're kind of Bill Maher calls it zombie lies, which I love. It's like it's something that used to maybe be true but no longer is. So like maybe that was the case, like where men like really only wanted the Kate Moss thing, but I can tell you that is not true anymore. Like widely it's not true.
Yeah, I think that we have built a storyline of what we think is perfect or acceptable, and getting it's such an interesting conversation, because it's like, where is the root of us needing to feel so perfect and so flawless, and I think that in my surrender of this aging, my husband's 6 years older than me, and it wasn't even a conversation as he was aging. It was just a fact of life. It was fascinating. We have a pretty large friend group and everyone's about the same age. So as the guys were aging, I mean, it was like, it was a non-event. It was just life, right? It was just another year. It was another decade. But when the women started approaching their 40s, that's when the conversation started. And I thought, what is happening here? Why are we doing this? And women would say things like, well, what if I'm just worried that my husband's not going to be attracted to me anymore? And what I heard underneath that is the threat of like feeling threatened that he might find other women attractive and want to be with them instead. And I remember thinking, this is so sad that you think that so much of what keeps you together in your relationship is his level of, is actually, let's be honest, your level of youthfulness. Because I'm sure the connection between a couple like that who's been together that long, there's so much more inside of that.
Yeah.
And so when my husband, he said something to me a couple weeks ago, and he said, you know what I think is the most incredible thing about having been together so long is he said, I still, sometimes I walk in the room and I see the 21-year-old girl that I met in the airport. And then there's this really fast movie that plays all the way up to now. And he can barely even say it without getting emotional. He's like, and I see our whole life in between. I see all the phases of you and all the stages of who you've been as a woman. And he said, and now like he loves this phase that I'm in so much. He finds it to be, he's like, Amanda, it is so powerful. Like to watch you walk into the room just the way you are, so unapologetic, where so many of the women in my group, let's just say, it's just they're having a different experience, right? And he's like, I see power when you walk into the room because you're not hiding anything. And it just lands very, very differently than the posing that a lot of people do. And so I do think that we tell these stories in our own head that we are not going to be as lovable. That's how little we think of ourselves. And I see it play out even more for women who have not developed any sense of career for themselves. I see that their looks are one of the only things they feel they have to offer the world, and their youthfulness. And when it's slipping, they feel like they're dying.
Yeah, it does. It feels because you also are inundated with all of this content that like it's so awful. It's mostly the red pill community, and I know that is not most men. Like I have two boys.
I don't even know what that is.
Oh, you don't know what that is?
No, I just heard somebody reference that the other day, and I didn't have a chance to ask.
Let me fill you in.
Tell me. This is the second time.
It's so toxic. And I want to preface, like I do not think this is most men. Like I love men. I've got two boys. My husband is incredible. I think that they're amazing. I do not think this is an accurate representation of men, but there is this pocket in the internet ecosystem. It's called Red Pilled, and it started off because, like, you know, in the Matrix, there's a blue pill where you want to be kind of lied to and have the delicious steak that's not real, or you take the red pill and it's like reality. You want the real thing.
Yes.
So it started off there, and it kind of took on a life of itself, which now it's these caricatures of what a masculine man is, which is he has like a harem of women, and he is not expected to be faithful because like he is supposed to spread his seed. So kind of warping evolutionary psychology to fit a narrative. Women are supposed to be faithful always and not work and just have babies and be very like trad archetype, not expect loyalty, not expect monogamy. What's another big takeaway? Women expire after 25.
Oh.
So hard expiration date. Under no circumstances a woman over 25 as attractive as a woman that is 25 or younger. That ideally you want virgins only.
So it's like pedophilia almost.
It's like, it's very like, it feels very manipulative. Like you said, an older woman, she has life experience, so she's not going to put up with bullshit, or she's going to see something dangerous before it happens, where you can more easily get what you want out of a younger, less experienced girl. And it's very predatorial, it feels like.
Very predatorial. And it sounds like oh, wow, I have not heard anything about this. And so this is very prevalent.
You'll see it, like if you scroll, and I know algorithms base off of like so many things, but I see it a lot, and it's crazy to me because even just looking at myself anecdotally, I feel more attractive now at 35 than I did at 25. And even if that's not objectively true, right, to like them do a poll or whatever, that doesn't matter. Like I myself feel more confident, and I feel more like just like a woman than I did then. Like in my 20s, it was so much external chatter and internal chatter, and like, what do they think? How am I going to look here? Like, like so much anxiety of it just simply existing.
Yes.
And now I'm like, it's okay. And I can look at my body in a much healthier way than I did then. It's still not, I'm a long way to go, but it is still so much better than when I was in my 20s. So I don't know. It's like, when you tell men that like, get rid of a woman after 25, you're missing that whole story, like that whole life story that you just explained, like your husband saying he sees you and then it speeds up and like he can appreciate all of you, all of the versions of you. And that's so beautiful.
I just don't think it's as valued.
I think in pockets, for sure.
Exactly. In the red pill community, right? That's not valued.
Yeah, it's not even seen.
It's the infantilization of women. And I really believe what lives under that is because what woman who's really lived some life is going to ever say yes to that? Mm-hmm. Which woman is going to sign up and be like, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, I'd love to be a part of it.
No self-worth, yeah.
You know, so I think it's the younger they are, the more we can delude them, the more we can control them, manipulate them, and get exactly what we want. And I also think how much suffering must live inside of those men who choose to live like that. Because I think every human, whether they want to admit it or not, I think every human wants to have at least one legendary love, wants to be known and so beautifully cared for and rallied for in every aspect of their experience as a human being. I can't imagine that's deeply satisfying for those men, and certainly not for the long run.
No, I'd say it's an aversion to like real vulnerability, right?
Absolutely.
And like having someone actually see you, like that's terrifying, because then if they see you and then reject you, then you are rejected. So the antidote to that is just not to be seen.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So there was this, I don't know if you saw, there was this clip of Pamela Anderson. Who I just adore her, and I love like even her recent story and her vulnerability and coming out with her docu-series or documentary. And she was getting ready for some event, and she's very no makeup now. Like she just does skincare, and she'll show you her skincare, and she goes to like Paris Fashion Week with no makeup.
I've seen that.
And gets like celebrated, and you're like, it's her face. And but if you almost want to say it's not brave because it's her face, but then when you see the comments, you're like, whoa, it actually really is, because she was getting retweeted and commented, and they were like, what happened to her? And she's still so beautiful, and not that my opinion should matter. I think she's still so beautiful, but she's older. She's old. She's not still 20. And it's like almost the more beautiful a woman was in her prime, the more she gets punished for having time catch up to her. Whereas like if you were more of like I don't know, like an average, like you weren't a sex symbol, then you're almost allowed a little bit more grace in that. But if you, how dare you commodify your beauty, you somehow now have to hold on to it forever. And I don't understand that.
Because it's like, how dare you be human is really the message, right? How dare you actually be a human being who ages because we wanted to look at you and feel something, and you're letting us down. So even when I've shared different information online, people are like, that's not who I thought you were. Or it's fascinating how strangers have an expectation of who you need to be. And the moment anything does not live up to what they need you to be for them, to feel relevant, to feel whatever, to have their need met, then all of a sudden you're somehow wrong for existing or being human or having a different experience. And so what she's really being punished for is being human, because the expectation is at all costs you will uphold that beauty and that youthfulness because we expect you to. You're Pamela Anderson.
Yeah.
You're not allowed. And if Pamela Anderson ages and it shows, oh shit, what does that mean for the rest of us?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
So I see it as like such an incredible thing that she's doing. And yet I understand also that there is going to be those kinds of comments. This is super, super occasional and quite rare, actually. But every once in a while, I will have a man who feels, and I know where it's coming from. He's got no profile picture. His name is like user 3271 or whatever. And he's always the one who's like, okay, grandma, nobody really cares. I'm like, oh, of course. Of course. It's always the man who can't handle hearing a woman who has wisdom speak about something that may be coming up against a way you would have to consider changing as a man. But yeah, people will always have expectations of who we're supposed to be. And it's just like, we just have to keep doing our work.
So talking about doing the work, I would love to hear about your retreat that you just had. And I guess I haven't done like a ton of psychedelic medicine. Like I've done like 2 different journeys, and like the most recent one was like the most intense one. And you said that you had someone come up to you and like, are these women on ayahuasca? Because like they were having such big breakthroughs.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you, because I do believe it's all inside. Like, I don't think you need to take anything to have these transformative experiences. I just think maybe some people like need a bigger kick in the butt. And like, that's what psychedelics can kind of offer as a jump start to
and
that.
it gets that part of your brain out of the way so it can really start to come to the forefront.
So I guess for someone who's trying to do this without anything, like taking anything externally, like what is the process to like embody it? Because that's the trick. Like I have intellectually known so much of the things that I discovered, but I embodied them last week, and that is a different world.
You're exactly right. It's a completely different story. And it's why I really moved my work out of the private practice talk therapy scene, because I recognized there were limitations. There's only so far we can go. Verbal processing is amazing, but it only takes us so far. We can only talk about the thing your dad said to you so many times. We can only see that was his fear, his this, his that, right? How many times are we going to talk about it before you have an experience that either releases it or in some cases, dependent on experiences, alchemizes it, and takes that fossil fuel that's been stuck inside of you and turns it into renewable energy for your life. So I take women. It would be nearly impossible for me to explain what I do in this podcast. And in all truth, it's almost would be a dishonor of the work to try to explain it. It is, I will say this, extremely intense, very, very powerful. I hold a huge safety in that room. I spend a day, almost a better part of a day, creating a profound trust and safety, not trust in me, trust in themselves. So ceremonially, I get them there to this place where I then demonstrate and lead. It's essentially rage release practices and grief release practices that we channel. And there's 3 steps that build it to get there. And then I demonstrate it. I'm very vulnerable, and I tell them like, okay, this is what I'm releasing right now. Sometimes it's something from the past. Sometimes it's collective rage and pain for the world and for women and children especially. But I take them through this process, and we have buckets everywhere. And I normalize that it has taken such a huge energetic frequency to push this down, to pad that in the back of your unconscious mind, that what you're going to notice is as we do this, you might start to feel the vomit want to come up. You might start to feel that you have to rip your clothes off. You might start screaming. You might start thrashing. No, that is the pain finally feeling safe to come out. And when you do this in groups of women, it is profound, because the more one woman vomits or screams, it gives permission for the woman next to her to release a little deeper. And so then we've got a whole room full of women just letting not just their pain out, but the collective pain of thousands of years of women and what we have been carrying. So it's the pain also of your mother from when you were in her womb, and in your grandmother when you were actually in your mom's ovaries, because she already had all of her eggs, and the potentiality of you already lived inside of even your grandmother when you were inside of your mom, when she was a fetus in your grandmother, and all the way back. So we are, because women often say to me, it feels so big, Amanda, it feels so overwhelming. And I said, because it's not just yours. You are carrying pain that is on behalf of all women who've ever walked in this world and women who are, and we dedicate all of my retreats to women who will never have access to this work, that will never have the privilege or opportunity to sit in a room like this and do this work. We're dedicating it not just to the little maidens inside of us who we abandon, but for every woman in the world. And so that release feels so big and is so big because it's thousands of years of pain that's been carried and stored inside of ourselves. Yeah.
So I love all of that. And I think before I started getting into all of this, I would have been so skeptical. And the first time that I saw like those release practices, I was very judgmental, and I really thought it was like a lot of attention-seeking behavior and there was nothing to it. And then I did it. And I was like, well, I can't judge it if I don't try it first. So
I love that.
I did it, and I was like, oh my gosh. And like how long it even lasted. And I think it needs to be a regular practice, because it's stuff just it's almost like if you had all of these fish and those were in different levels of your consciousness, and you cast a net and you swoop them up, you think you just cleared it out, but all that happened is some of the fish moved up and then there's more coming. Right. So you think that you're clear now, and you might be for a time, but it's because the other stuff hasn't moved up to your consciousness yet.
That's exactly right.
So I think it needs to be regular. When this happens, it's like you're experiencing life differently. Like for me, my body feels different when I have sex with my husband. I'm like, the other thing I was doing was not this. Like, we're doing something different. And it's because I'm safe. I now feel safe. So now I'm not allowed to be in my body. And how unsafe I have felt for probably my whole life. I had no idea, because I have just numbed myself to the point where I'm like, this is functioning, this is normal, instead of being really tuned into myself, which has been screaming pretty much my whole life. Like, you are not safe and you need to slow down. And I think that was kind of the biggest lesson that I had from last week. And it's funny because right before you got here, I had a phone call with like my doctor. It's like private healthcare, and they're amazing. And the woman was talking to me about my cortisol, and she's like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel stressed? I go, if I'm being honest, no, I don't feel stressed. What's happened is I've convinced myself I'm not stressed. And she started laughing. She's like, I'm so glad that you have that awareness, because like your body is saying you are like chronically stressed. And she's like trying to help me with like meditation and breath work and these kinds of things. But if I didn't do this panel that is objective, saying you are in fight or flight for far too long, my mind, which I've learned I cannot trust, it is the biggest liar that I've ever met. My mind is telling me it's all good. You got this. And how much that's affected even just like my marriage, because it's this, I've got this, instead of seeing this person who loves you like infinitely. And he's like, I will help shoulder this. But because of my own past, I don't trust that I can, delegate it in any way. And I'm sure you probably saw a lot of that. I think that's probably like a huge common trauma or narrative that a lot of women have, is like, I'm shouldering all of this, and like lack of trust, lack of safety.
Yes. And oftentimes the childhood experience was I couldn't trust. And the people that I was supposed to, quote unquote, trust the most let me down. And so I think often that's where that experience of these primary people in your life, when they let you down, or worse off, they abuse you, you learn that the world is not safe. And that is not an overnight undoing. That process takes time. And you're exactly right. Like, your analogy with the fish is so beautiful. One of the things that I always think about is like, every day, I don't get up this morning and say, well, you know what? I brushed my teeth 3 days ago. I don't need to brush them today. I get up and I brush my teeth every single day, because there's that buildup, right? I floss my teeth. And if I want to take it even a step further, maybe I do some tongue scraping. If I want to take it a step further, I swish with coconut oil. I do the oil pulling. So there are levels at which I can clean my mouth. And I think it's fascinating that we often don't think about how we clean and clear all of the emotional buildup that happens over decades and decades, and how we become offensive, we become unapproachable, we become all of these things, or we spill over into other people unknowingly because we're not emotionally hygienic. So just in the way we teach children oral hygiene, we don't teach them anything about sourcing their emotions. But if you watch a 2-year-old have a temper tantrum in a grocery store, you're like, they know exactly how to be in the moment. Or an animal in the woods, like how they shake and clear it and then they keep going. But we somehow, as we get into, like, for girls, the data shows after around the age of 10 years old, she starts losing connection to who she just inherently is and starts performing. At 10 years old, she starts to perform, to be pleasing, to be chosen, to be loved. And so when you spend the majority of your life then thereafter performing, it is so hard to have a connection to your body. Before I came here, I have a lot of clients in Boxer who work with me just through voice messaging every day. And one of my clients just said to me, Amanda, since doing this work, I have noticed, I feel like I'm channeling my whole life now. My business is being channeled. My relationship is being channeled. What I want to eat, my body, the way I move, I'm just channeling, where before I was thinking from my logical brain. And to surrender into this, how is it possible my body knows everything that I need to be doing next? When I feel, because I talk about how I intuitively feel my way through everything. There have been a handful of other podcasts that wanted to fly me to different places in the last couple of weeks. And it was a no for me. And I don't know why or how. I can't even explain it to you. I just intuitively, there's feelings of like, no, I want to say yes to this one. I want to say no to that one. And I just know. I don't go into like all this research. I do a quick dive. I talk to my team and I'm like, yeah, I said yes to this one. I said no to all of these ones. And they're like, well, why? I'm like, I can't explain it to you. It's just, I just know. There's a trust and a knowing this is where I need to be.
No, absolutely. But you can't get there if you're not clear, because there's no connectivity there.
No.
So the gentleman I had on just a few days ago, he was the one that facilitated the journey.
Yes.
And he was talking about like there's like 50 times more information sent from your heart to your brain than your brain to your heart. And if there's a blockage there, you're missing out on so much of that information. And what he taught me to do was like self-muscle testing, right? So if you're asking your body, it's amazing. Yes. It is amazing. And one of those things I would have said nonsense before I did it.
Right.
And you cannot, like all of that somatic stuff, I'm like, I need to do a deep dive and I want to learn so much more because I firsthand experienced it and I just know it to be true now.
Yes.
So I just did the same thing. I had this really big event in September that we got invited to. And I was asking who I wanted to invite. And my husband's like, we have 2 extra tickets you want to invite. And it was like a toss up. And one of them I was thinking, this is who I should invite. And the other one, I was like, I wanted to be there. Like I knew that, but I was like, let's do the muscle test. And it was like night and day. And I was, I'm going to honor this and I'm going to listen to my body. And again, going to like, for me specifically, how much I can't trust my mind. I think the way that my husband kind of broke it down for me is like, yes, your body is obviously like a very clear channel right now. So listen to that. But the other flip side is that now there's a beautiful opportunity to control the mind and like, and you do that through meditation and breath work. So it's saying this isn't where it necessarily needs to be. Like you're getting almost too much stuff that's not yours, not meant for you. And that's what's getting in your own way. So until you can master the mind, not control, I should say, master the mind, listen to your body, honor that, but also like do what is necessary to get rid of a lot of that chatter and a lot of that just like distraction, right? Because I think coherence is probably the goal, like body, mind, spirit. So right now, body is the tool I have. That's what's working. So lean into that. But now opportunity to work on mind and spirit to get everything coherent.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that, you know, I take women through when they start working with me a really beautiful womb meditation, because I think for women, there is a connection to there's that infinite portal, like the potentiality of the universe literally inside of a woman's body, the creation and possibility that it is housed there, that infinite creativity that we don't source from at all. We are so disconnected from, and you can see it with the levels of endometriosis and fibroids and cancer and all of the things that happen for women, because we are so disconnected. There's so much shame that lives between a woman's head, like from her navel down, like the amount of shame that is coded there for women. And so I think connecting women in my work, connecting them first and foremost to their womb, even if they've had a hysterectomy, to that womb space, all of that power still lives there. That is when I see my clients begin to blossom and open into ways of that they never even could have imagined or expected for themselves, because they're trusting from that internal GPS, that internal source code, that in a very patriarchal world with very, very few female role models and leaders, we still don't have languaging that is just for women on these kinds of journeys. So one of my friends, my best friend, we were going off grid in October in New Mexico to go camping for a couple of days. And she's driving and she's telling me about this book she read and this podcast she listened to. And at one point I stopped and I looked at her and I said, why do you never learn from women? Why is it every time you talk about something you read or listened to, it's always a man? Where are the female leaders that you drive from and like learn from and get inspired by? And she looked at me and she's like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. So her and I really went on this deep dive. We're like, where are the female leaders? Name them. Name like the big revolutionary, like public intellectuals, thought leaders, thought changers, movers, makers for women in a way that brings that power and internal growth and spirituality all online. Where are they?
I would say the only one I can think of that I that I think is doing it the way that you're describing is probably Gabby Reese. She's Laird Hamilton's wife. So I think that her lens is feminine, and like it's like self-development through her perspective, which I think is beautiful. I think a lot of the women that I'm even thinking of now, even though really popular ones, like it's still very masculine.
It's very
so
masculine.
It's like driven, like boxes to kind of tick. And you know, we all have both. And I think it's balance looks different in everyone, but I think most women, and correct me if you disagree, but I think most women are in their masculine.
So, absolutely.
So if you're already there and then you're consuming everything that's masculine, you're compounding it. So while I think there's always like a time and space that you will need to tap into that for sure.
Of course.
But it's like, don't live there. So you have to balance back out. So where are you creating that balance for yourself? And it's so hard because besides Gabby, I don't really know like feminine women in this space that I'm like, I want to learn from.
Right. And that is such a huge deficit. I'm all for all of this growth that we are talking about, but I am exhausted listening to men tell me about an experience that I can't incorporate and I can't really reach for. There are elements here and there, yes, but I have yet to find that woman that takes me on this incredible journey inside of my feminine power. I already know, I've got my masculine figured out. I already know. And you know, I know what I'm doing there for the most part. I could probably surrender into a little bit more of the divine masculine. Sometimes it's a little bit wounded in like this perfectionism and it's all got to be done a certain way. It's sometimes running the back end of my business. But I am really, and that's why I'm so excited about this work. And I'm so excited about what's happening in this work because I just feel like week by week, these women, and I have a global community of women, my clients are all over the world, are waking up. And it's honestly like they're waking up from a decades-long slumber. I literally see it in them and I can hear it. Their voices change, the way they speak, the pace at which they speak, the level of orgasm that they are experiencing in their life, the way they walk, the way they don't have to fill the space with an you know, just because it's uncomfortable. I mean, everything. And then the beauty after that is how the relationships that they partake in get to also then blossom into something even better than they've ever imagined. But I am really ravenous for that kind of female leadership. And when I didn't find her I was like, well, I'll just keep becoming her.
Absolutely.
We become the thing that we so need, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. If something's not there, create it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's, again, something that's like really, I think, special to the feminine is creation. And one example, and it sounds so silly because maybe someone's listening and they're like, you're nitpicking and there's nothing different. If you're listening to someone who has something to offer and they're a man, it's not different than if it's a woman. And this is where I'll challenge somebody, is as simple as this habit stacking that everyone is so crazy for to create better habits. And they talk about just wake up an hour early and then do your cold plunge and then do your journaling and all of this stuff. And it's that simple. It's that simple as just setting your alarm clock an hour earlier. That's not true for a lot of women because they take on the majority of the childcare, especially up front. And if you're breastfeeding, forget about it. There's no such thing as a schedule, let alone one that's predictable. So and this is a meme that is just famous on the internet. It's saying, me as a mom wanting to have 10 minutes to myself to have coffee. So I set my alarm 10 minutes earlier and then it's your toddler staring at you. It's like they knew you changed your time somehow. So you could wake up an hour earlier and I almost guarantee the baby or the toddler is going to wake up an hour earlier with you, even if you're quiet as a mouse. So for women, it's not this discipline and this structure. It's actually the opposite. It's flow and surrender. So okay, they're up early with me. We're just going to go with the day. Where can I flow and squeeze these things in for myself? Where can I like do this in a place of surrender and not trying to control everything?
Yes.
And then that's what I think is going to balance your hormones and your mood and help you recover from things from postpartum, not like this stringent
Yes. And if you read the book Invisible Women, it is incredible. And it is prolific I've never read a book that had so much data and research to back pretty much every single sentence that she wrote. But it talks about how all of those theories and all of the diets and the regimes and workout schedules and the cold plunge and the supplements, all of it has been tested on the bodies of men because men have the same, their cycle's not changing like a woman, right? Like women are changing our cycle so often. So we're very hard to study because we're not all the same. But men, because they don't have the hormone fluctuation, they study men and then they do that. They toss like the blanket and say, okay, that's like it's for everybody. This is the research that we've shown. This is the best way to achieve these things. And I mean, on my cycle, like I don't have to, I can't even fathom. We have a cold plunge. I do it occasionally when I feel like it. My husband does it almost he does it like every other day. I can't fathom on a day that I am bleeding there's any desire to get into that cold plunge. I mean, that is like the most and I remember my daughter, oh my gosh, my daughter's unbelievable. Her boyfriend, she was on her period a couple of months ago and they were all at the house and her boyfriend was going to use the cold plunge and they were all, and my sons, everybody was going back there. And she's like, oh, there's just no way. She's like, I can't, I'm on my period. And he's like, you know, sometimes you got to make yourself uncomfortable. And she looked at him and she's like, you know, unlike you who needs to fabricate a place to be uncomfortable in your life, I wake up as a woman every day. I already am uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable when I walk to my car late at night. I'm uncomfortable when I'm walking across campus and I'm alone and coming into my apartment. I am uncomfortable when I have cramps every month. So no, I'm good. I don't really need to force uncomfortable moments on my life. I live with them. I was like, oh, wow. It's just so potent when you think of it through that lens. And so she is in complete, like, I have no desire. I don't have to prove or perform for anybody. I just have no desire to do that. Nothing in my body says, yeah, I'm going to try that.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of what they call it cross-sex mind reading comes in. So it's men exist in this space where their physical safety isn't normally at risk and they don't see it. Because it's not their reality, mostly speaking. Right. For women, it's the opposite. All those things that you said are so true. And most girls are taught this to keep them safe. Don't go down this alley. Make sure that there's a light. Have your phone. Check your door. Close your windows. And this leads us to a state of being in constant fight or flight. And we get these autoimmune issues and we wonder why it's so much more prevalent in women. It's because we don't feel safe. Right. But not to blame men, because most men are good. It is a small percentage that are dangerous and violent. And for the good men, they don't understand. So it's the thing that's helped me a lot was having that conversation with my husband. Like, this is the reality that a lot of women live in. So if a woman, they say like women are more critical when the man is driving because of that. So she's just more hyper aware of the risks and he doesn't. So just him being like, I've got this, and just like letting you know that you're safe. So that validation of like, I'm here, like I've got you, and then you can let go. Sometimes that just needs to be verbalized and then the woman can relax. Yeah. So it's not to make her feel like shit because you're obviously safe. And it's not to make him feel like shit like you should know. It's like, how can we work together so that I can know that you've got this and I can relax? And then he is going to want to do that. Most men are going to be light up for that opportunity to show up for their woman and be like, I've got you, baby. You know, so just to have more open communication and not with like blame or judgment and just like, this is just what it is. And this is what I need. And then he'll be like, I'm so happy to give that to you.
Absolutely. That is something that my husband says to me over and over again. He's like, I love this version of you the past 15 years that just can say, hey, this is what I'm feeling right now. And I think like the best way for you to support me through this is X, Y, or Z. He's like, because before I felt like it was one big guessing game and I was trying to be a mind reader, and more often than not, I was doing all the wrong things. But I was in that princess energy of like, well, he should just know. He should figure it out. Right? Like I didn't want to own, I didn't want to have that vulnerability. I didn't want to showcase that because I had mistaken that vulnerability was weakness. I didn't actually understand that it was powerful to be able to hold the frequency of it and say, this is what I need. I totally agree. That was me for a lot of my life. And I was
I'm reading this book. It's called Raising Lions. It's amazing for anyone that has kids or is working with children. And he talks about the power of vulnerability and where that falls into kind of a hierarchical system. So you'll have someone who's maybe the beta or a smaller pack member. And what you'll see with wolves is they'll go on their back and expose everything vulnerable. What a healthy leader, healthy alpha will do is come over and now take responsibility for that vulnerability and take care of and protect. What you'll see an unhealthy, or what you would call like a shadow masculine, is I'm now going to rip out that jugular and I'm going to take advantage of the spots that you just showed me. So given, I think a lot of people, including myself, the way that I have just lived life, it has taught me that if I do that, it's going to be used against me. So it created all of these barriers and of ways for people to love me. I'm not going to let you because I know it inevitably will be used against me. And understanding that's not normal and that's not healthy. What is supposed to happen is actually the other thing, which is like that empowering, like coming together and like taking care of. So like vulnerability is the bravest thing you can do.
It is the bravest thing to lay on your back and be like, I'm going to show you all of me, right? And I'm going to trust that you're going to be, the right people will be able to receive that. And there are very few people in life that we do that for. But yeah, I just, it's interesting because at the end of my retreat yesterday, a lot of the women, they were all like, came up and were standing in line to say different things. And they were saying, I've done so much different kinds of work, Amanda. I've been to so many events. I've read every book, and I haven't ever experienced a leader with so much vulnerability as you. And the way that everything you teach us, you don't just demonstrate it, like you go, and they can see, like I enter like a different state. I go into it. I share a lot about my personal life. There were some very vulnerable, beautiful, very tearful moments. But I don't believe that good leadership is on a pillar. I don't believe that the alpha, and my belief as how I experience, I wouldn't even say like, I just want to say my leadership. All my leadership is I'm an open channel. Like I am this channel that is open and receiving from the divine. And my responsibility in the world is to share that with more women. So I was saying to them at the opening of the retreat that unlike a lot of leaders, I'll never be pedestalized. That's why at the retreat center I went to, and there were other retreats going on over the weekend, and we peeked into the other rooms to see, they had asked me, we're going to we'll build the stage and then everyone will sit down there. And I said, no. I don't sit on stages. I sit with the people in a circle, with the women. I want to be on the floor with them because I am just in such belief that I'm just sharing wisdom that's coming through me, that I'm not the owner of this wisdom. It's just my lived experience that I can share with them. And I think that is what we are lacking so much of in leadership as well, is that surrendered, feminine, yet so powerful at the same exact time, that will walk you through things and you'll feel. Women said to me, I've never in my life felt that safe at a retreat before. I've done so many things, and that was the safest I ever felt. And that was also the deepest I was ever able to go. And I'm like, right, because you felt the safety. And I believe that in leadership, we can build safety through vulnerability, and we can build impeccable leadership through raw vulnerability. And I don't see much of that in a lot of the leaders that I see right now.
So you have these retreats and these women have these awesome breakthroughs. What's the integration process like?
Yeah, so they have 3 months with me in my community. So they're all like entering today. My team is putting them in there today because integration is so essential to go and have a huge transformation and energetic move through you like that. And then just be like, okay, thanks for coming.
See ya.
Yeah.
If you want to see me again, it'll be another, whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's super dangerous. So they have 3 months with me in the Muses community where women who are in there are doing this work, right? And then they also all bought a ticket. I have a live event happening in November in Phoenix, and they all bought tickets to that as well because what they recognize is I never want to step outside of this work. I didn't even know anything like this existed. And now I never want to leave. And I want to meet more women of this like-mindedness and this growth mentality because this is a pretty big thing that is happening right now. I predict something bigger than my wildest dream that I can't find the words or verbalize because I think it's everything that has been happening is so much bigger than I even predicted, that women are coming from around the world to this event in November. And I think we are unlocking some cages that have been inaccessible for thousands of years. And once you start to do that, things change in a way that you can never go back again. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's so potent.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I started doing all of this so much younger, because I feel like at the very beginning of the episode when we were talking about Botox, and I'm like, well, what if you do it for yourself, and you kind of pushed back a little bit and you're like, would you really be doing it like for yourself? Which is a very valid point. I'm in this stage because I'm still very much processing. It's like, how many of my choices were like not actually ones I wanted to make, or in some way I've done a lot of backflips to justify doing certain things. And that's really hard to look at, especially in my case, because it's obviously all on the internet. So it's doing that and then not having, obviously the privacy of doing that, because it's like, well, what my choices amplified. Right. Do you know what I mean? Right. And for such a long time, I was like, no, that's the thing I wanted to do. Even I had a conversation 2 days before I did this work, and it was a women's call, and we had like our elder, she calls herself our fairy godmother. She's amazing. And one other woman, and both are probably a little bit more conservative. So they were just asking me out of genuine curiosity about like why I got into the industry. Mm-hmm. And I gave an answer that I felt at the time was really true. And I was like, I think no matter what, I would have ended up getting naked. Like, I think like that was just part of my story. And I think, I still think part of that is true, but what is different post that is the motivating factor of like what made me make those choices, because it used to be a lot more innocent and like a lot more what I would have said was authentic. And now I have so many questions, because I'm like, maybe it wasn't, and like maybe it was all of these other things, and I'm in this, it's a really weird place to be. And it's like, if I had done all of this as like a young girl, I would have been able to have more clarity around like, this is me, and then this is not me. This is me, and this is my baggage, and then be able to separate those and like live a more authentic life. Yeah,
And I think it's to be able to look back at that now. It's just endless compassion for yourself, and that, and I've had things too that I look back in my past, and I have two choices: to have so much shame and judgment around it for myself, or to have incredible compassion that's like, oh, I can now see why you made that decision. I see what you were actually seeking, and but you disguised it, and you thought it was an empowered decision when in fact it really wasn't. Yeah. And that's been my experience. And now I just look at that version of me. I did go through some grief and regret and lost time in my life that I'll never get back. And I have vowed that the time now will be so intentional and everything being very aware, because that's where I sat with that question when I stopped coloring my hair 7 years ago. I was like, okay, I was sitting there at the salon. I'm like, let me see. Like, am I actually really, really here for me? What do I believe about gray hair? And the truth was, what I believed about gray hair was that it was beautiful, and it signified like lots of stories. And I've always loved, I used to work in a nursing home and when I was in college, and I've always loved the people and aging and elderly. I love deep lines on a face or a hand. I just find it to be almost mystical to me that you've been through that much, and the map of it is there for all of us to see. It's incredible to me. And so I sat there in that salon with my eyes closed in that intention, because I was on to like, I think this is my last time. So I said, Amanda, what do you believe about? And this is the thing, I don't think we investigate our own beliefs, and we make choices unconsciously. We don't even know why we're doing them. And when I opened my eyes, I was like, I'm done. I'm never coming back again. And that was 7 years ago, and I've never looked back a day. And I just let it do the natural grow out the way it had to be. And I decided to make it mean I was unwrapping a gift every morning when I go to the mirror and see the new silvers coming through and the patterns. And I decided it was going to be my silver crown. It was going to signify like all I'd lived through in my life. And prior to that, I was just I was like a robot. I was like, oh, the grays are showing. Let me call the salon, book the appointment. Let me go do. And then I was sitting there like, what am I actually putting on my scalp? I eat organic at home, and then I turn around, and this is what really blows me away. I was invited by a friend to go to this event in Miami a couple of months ago. And there's a lot, I would say the majority of at least the upper socioeconomic world of women in Miami are running. I am the anomaly. I will just say that. And I think sometimes there's like people on the phone outside my neighborhood, like, we just spotted a real woman at the mailbox. Alert, alert, does not compute. We do not know what this alien is doing in the neighborhood. But I'm at this event and I was with a friend who lives really naturally as well. And we commented on the fact out of like 100 women, we were certain, other than the woman leading it and us, we were certain we were the only two who had no alterations of any sort. And I was just like, I feel really sad right now. And it was for women in midlife. I'm like, I feel really sad. And they were asking this woman, this hormone expert, about all these things. And it was fascinating to me how they're like, and I eat this and I do this and I do this workout. And it was all about the exterior presentation of the body. It had nothing to do with the internal. And I thought that is so fascinating to me that you are priding yourself on how healthy you eat, and yet you're injecting all of this unknown into your face. Mm-hmm. I predict in 20 years from now, we're going to look back at this the way we used to look at lobotomies. When people had mental health issues, they used to remove their frontal lobe. When women were pregnant, they used to tell them, smoke some cigarettes. It'll curb your appetite so you don't gain too much weight. We now can't even fathom that. We can't fathom that children used to be in cars without seatbelts. Mm-hmm. We're going to look at Botox and be like, do you believe that women were so desperate to not show signs of aging, they put rat poison in their face and thought it was going to be okay? They didn't think there was going to be a consequence to it. That is what I predict is going to happen. And so we're at this conference and I went up to the leader afterwards. I'm like, I'm really curious. When women were saying, well, I do all these things and my hormones are all over the place and they're a wreck right now, why you didn't call out, hey, have you ever, because I heard you say, be really careful about the cream you put on your skin. Read the ingredients. If it's not organically sourced or really raw and natural, you're absorbing those toxins into your bloodstream. It's going to disrupt your endocrine system. I'm really curious why you didn't say that about all the Botox that they had and all the fillers. And she said, because the woman leading this event told me last night I couldn't touch that topic.
Whoa.
So we keep each other enslaved because I have been slammed for talking about Botox and I'll never stop talking about it because you know what? We need a friggin' mother. We need a mother who's screaming. When my kids would try to run out into traffic, I didn't say, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that, honey. Are you sure? I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. I said, stop. What are you doing? Because I cared so much and I wanted them to be safe. And I care so much about women and believe so much in their power. I'm willing to say the things because I know those who fall away will never have been for me anyways. And those who stay will pique their curiosity because I'm insulted that we are tiptoeing around and we're being like, well, but you know, like do whatever you want, whatever makes you happy. And I'm not talking about judgment. I'm talking about let's actually come to the table and have really hard conversations. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. Can we be mature enough to say things that are evocative and are going to stir the pot? Yes, I'm willing to do that. And I went on a podcast a couple of weeks ago and I was so disappointed that after being on this podcast has been running for a couple of years. And I found out that my episode was the only episode that they said this before the episode. And I didn't know this till after it was all done and produced. The thoughts and beliefs shared on this episode by our guest are not necessarily the thoughts and beliefs of the host and the company. And I thought, this is what we're doing now. We cannot have a woman have a strong opinion about something without making sure that no one else is going to get mad at us. Like, I find it so sad and so insulting. Men can have these huge conversations. They can be in this, big debate about something, and they're still respected as thought leaders. We do it as a woman, and women have come onto my page and be like, why are you, I've shared my experience about not coloring my hair. Women literally say to me, stop shaming other women. I'm like, the fact that you heard shame in my personal story is a projection of how you feel. Mm-hmm. I'm sharing my story. And I'm sure as hell, just like when I had natural childbirth, women would be like, oh, but that wasn't my experience. So I don't like when you talk about that. Oh, okay. So if my experience is opposite and you somehow feel threatened by it, it's on you to do your own internal work to figure out what that means. Why do we keep tiptoeing around each other and be patting each other on the head? Where's that leader who's willing to say bullshit?
That happens to me with the breastfeeding topic a lot because I'm a hardcore, like, obviously you're supposed to breastfeed your baby, full stop. If you're doing a bottle, it's less than 5% of women are not physically capable of breastfeeding. And I'm so against I'm against formula. I'm openly against formula because I think it's lazy. I think it's a way of you avoiding connection with your kid and intimacy with your kid. It's like that Rumi quote. It's like all of these layers that you put up and blockades of being loved, and you are scared to be loved even by your child. And that's going to get like people pissed, but that it's true. And you can say convenience, or I don't want to pump, or I'm at work. That's not what I'm talking about.
I know women who work 40 plus hours a week and are still pumping because it is really important to them that they give their child that level of the nutrition. Right. And this isn't about,
if you're listening.
Yes. And if you're listening to this and you feel guilt or you feel shame or you feel othered or you feel triggered right now, please hear the invitation of what is possible. Maybe the only possibility that you can hear right now is we get to have varying opinions and big, strong feelings about things. And it doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means this is my deeply held belief. And I am tired of tiptoeing around in conversations with women. So much so that it has certain women can't stand me. And I'm so okay with that because I'm not here to please everyone. That's why I was so drawn to your podcast, because I'm like, I love her. I love that she talks about things that everyone else would be so afraid to touch. Like, it's like the biggest turn on for me. Like, why can't we do this more often with women? Why can't we have like, and so what if we have an opposite opinion? Why can't we do this and still decide like, I respect what you said. I respect your power. I respect your vision and your beliefs without making you wrong or like, oh, I'm never talking to her again. It's like, I think all of the beauty and growth and opportunity lives in the places where we come to the middle and we're like, I'm not sure. Like me being able to like say in pretty much irritation to my best friend, like, I'm so tired of every time you talk about someone you're learning from, it's always a man. And her to have this like light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, I never even thought about that. You're right. So because she's always talking about how she feels like she's overly in her masculine. I'm like, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. You keep feeding it. It's what you feed.
Yes. Yeah, I'm a huge breastfeeding advocate. I had natural childbirth and then taught childbirth and breastfeeding classes and just found it's one of the things that, oh my gosh, natural childbirth and the breastfeeding were two of, honestly, the moments that changed the trajectory of my life and the way I do my business because I tapped into a connection with my body and a power that I know for a fact I wouldn't have if I'd bypassed those experiences. I know I wouldn't have. So yeah, I've loved those experiences as a woman. It's part of what makes us so unique and very powerful.
It's truly a spiritual experience.
It is.
Yeah, getting pregnant, having a baby, and those months of postpartum and like small toddlerhood, like it's truly a spiritual practice.
Yes.
So it's like lean into the thing. Even though I don't like that term, like the points of discomfort. It's like, what am I supposed to see here? Like, you're like a wound is being touched.
Yes.
And what do I need to learn from this moment? Like, why do I feel an aversion? Why am I avoiding this thing? Because usually it's something that you have to look at, and it's not running away from that. Like, oh, I just need to feel good all of the time. That's not life.
No, it's not. And I had a lot of people in my circle who were very uncomfortable with my breastfeeding. They had a lot of big feelings about it. And it stirred up a lot of what breasts mean to them, you know, and God love her. But even my mom, when I had my very first baby and he was like 6 months old, we were at a restaurant, and you know how as a new mom, it's like, it's rare that you actually eat a hot meal.
Yes.
And that you actually get to stay with everyone and have it at the same time. So the meal had been delivered to the table. It was the same time my baby was waking up from his nap. And the first thing, he's like rooting, he's like looking for the breast. So I lift my shirt, I start feeding him, and I'm also feeding myself. And my mom says, what are you doing? I said, I'm feeding us, both of us.
My baby.
Yeah. And she says, I would prefer you go into the bathroom to do that. And I said, do you want to take your plate and go eat in the bathroom? Because last time I checked, it's probably the dirtiest place in this restaurant. I'm not giving my son his dinner in a bathroom. And it was this moment for her. She's like, well, it's just unnecessary. I'm like, what's unnecessary, Mom? Because that's what they're made for. The world has sexualized them. I'm doing exactly the function that they were made for. And I just kept resisting, and I just kept showing up. And I think it was only like 2015 or 2018 maybe that it was finally legalized in all states so that a woman wouldn't receive a ticket for breastfeeding in public.
No way.
Yes. I think it's 2018.
Whoa, that's way more recent than I would have anticipated.
I wrote about it in my book, all these things that we would have never imagined. Like women couldn't open their own checking account until the year I was born, 1972. So there were all these things like we think we're like, oh, it's been like we've made all these strides. And yet there's a lot of evidence when we look at it that says, oh, that's not the case. But yeah, that was one of them that really blew me away. I've never probably lived in one of those states because that wasn't my experience. But I thought, oh my gosh, there are places women would have been ticketed for nursing their child in public.
Yeah, I remember with my first, he was born in 2019, and being a first-time mom, I think you're still trying to get the swing of things, especially if you don't have role models or you haven't been around babies and newborns. So I had so much anxiety. I knew I didn't want to be a mom that was experiencing shame when I was breastfeeding. I wanted to breastfeed when I needed to do it, and I did not want to make it a thing. But my body was beat like, don't look at me. Am I going to get yelled at? Because you've seen that. You've seen people go up to total strangers and say that it was inappropriate. And the audacity is just crazy.
It blows me away.
And then I also had anxiety about how I would react in that moment because I don't think it would be good for the other person. So I'm like, well, what's going to happen? So much uncertainty. And my husband's like, it's fine. You're fine. Just do what you have to do. Yeah. How can I help you? And then by the time I had my second, I'm just like, okay, here we are. Yeah. And then I'd have in-laws be like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm like, it's nothing. It's a boob. You've seen a boob. It's a boob. He's eating. It's not a big deal.
It's like, I almost want to say, and I remember saying this one time, I can't remember who, maybe it was to like my brother-in-law. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I said, what are you apologizing for? What's the difference between a boob or an elbow? Mm-hmm. It's like the story that you tell about the boob being something else. Like it's just flesh. It's just tissue. Mm-hmm. It is fascinating to me. But yet we've normalized driving down the street. And like, I remember at a time when I was nursing and I was nursing on a bench and this thought went through my mind. I was outside like a park area we were living in Connecticut. There's this little downtown area. And I looked up and there was the Victoria's Secret store was right there. And there were boobs everywhere on full display on girls who were probably, 15 posing as like a 25-year-old. And I thought, isn't that so interesting? It's okay that way when it's for the gaze of the male. But when it's for what it was made for, to feed the baby, it is somehow wrong. It's somehow, us being law breaking citizens.
There's this clip, it was on Reno 911, and I don't know if you've ever watched it. It's like a comedy cop show, just over the top, and there's an airplane scene and they're going to Las Vegas. So you see all sorts of people that are heading in first class. Like you've got this guy who's in fishnets and sequins and like nipple piercings. You've got strippers. You've got all sorts of like wild outfits. And they're like, we'd like to report an inappropriate outfit or inappropriate nudity or something like that. So someone's being obscene on the plane. So the police officer comes on and he walks by the man that's like in a thong with nipple rings. He walks by the stripper who's practically naked, and he stops at the mom that's breastfeeding her baby, and he's like, "You're under arrest." And she's like, "What?" And he's like, "Put those things away. Don't you have any decency?" And he takes the mom off the plane, and it's so good because it's so true. I feel like it's so true. You can see all of that and you're like, that's fine. That's their expression. But then you see something that is life sustaining and you're like, how dare you? That's gross.
It's so true. Oh my gosh, what a great example.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I could talk to you for days. I feel like, it's the car is going to be here in like 15 minutes. Okay. 15 minutes. But before we wrap, would you like to tell the guests like how they can support you, upcoming retreats, like plug away, please?
Yeah. So the best place to find me would be on Midlife Muse on both Instagram and TikTok. And my website that has everything about me and all the ways to work with me is Amanda Hanson, HANSON.com. Yeah. And my next big live event is going to be in Arizona, November 2nd and 3rd. And it's 1,000 women. And it is going to be, when I try to explain it, it is going to be the most transformative party of the year. It's almost like where the Taylor Swift energy or Beyonce energy of a concert meets a women's march. Like it's going to be like women and this beautiful power and the essence of womanhood underneath like massive transformation and a lot of celebration and party and like the most outrageous outfits you've ever seen.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Well, congratulations on all your success.
Thank you so much. And thank
really
you so much for having me. I really enjoyed our time.
Of course, me too. And if you liked this episode, please hit like and subscribe. And if you have 2 seconds, hit 5 stars on that review. It helps with the algorithm. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.